Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here to talk about the best recordings of Debussy's Images pour Orchestra. Now, as you may or may not know, Debussy did several images. He did for piano, a bunch of them, and then there is this set for orchestra. Now, like so many of Debussy's pieces, this is a triptych. There are 3 numbers, although there is a certain numerological wizardry in the central one, Iberia, which also has 3 movements. So you have 3 pieces with a central panel of 3 sections. The 3 sections are gigue, and this is for all of the image. There's gigue, jigs, Gigue Triste actually was the original title. Sad Jigs, which is sort of a contradiction in terms, but that was Debussy's point. And then Iberia, another one of those fabulous Spanish pieces by composers who never went to Spain. I may do a video about Spanish pieces by composers who never went to Spain. There's so many of them, and they're kind of fun. That's an idea. Keep that in mind. Anyway, Iberia has 3 movements, as I mentioned. There is, something like from the rues and the streets, street, from the streets and byways and, par les rues et chemins, the streets and the byways, and then les parfums de la nuit, the scents of evening, the scent as in smell, odors of evening, and then bells in morning and happy festival stuff. And then the last of the image is Ronde de Printemps, spring rounds, a jolly spring thing. Now, Debussy employs a folk song in this piece, which he actually does quite often in his work. It's the same folk song. It's Nous n'irons plus au bois. We're not going to the woods anymore. And the opening of the tune is la da 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 da. That's it. That's the only part you got to know. If you hear it, great. If you don't hear it, who cares? I never paid any attention to it, and you don't need to either. Now, here's the trick with the image. First of all, they really should be performed together. They really should. They are a single work, in my view. They're mostly performed separately because Iberia became very popular all by itself, especially on collections of fake Spanish music. And I mean, it's wonderful. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. But if you play them all together, what you do is you get a single solid work of symphonic length. It's about 35 minutes long, all told, 33, 35 minutes, somewhere in there. And it's wonderfully satisfying. It comes to a rousing climax at the end. It has lots of color and contrast. The scoring of the image is mature Debussy. It is very, very pointillistic. Pointillistic. It's like a Jacques Seurat painting. It really is. I mean, it's dabs of color. There is nothing. I mean, I suppose you could call the central part of Iberia impressionistic in that sort of foggy, swooshy sense. But the fact of the matter is the music really, really benefits from extreme precision and clarity in execution. And so conductors tend to do the image extremely well. I mean, they just do. I can't explain why. Maybe that's the reason. I don't know. They are remarkable works. They really are. And not as popular as, The Afternoon of a Faun or La Mer, because they're not as tuneful. They are much more interested in things like rhythm and texture and color. And for that reason, they tend not to be performed as often, and I think not performed as well. And they aren't performed ensemble, together, as they should be. So I've got, 10 or 11 or a dozen recordings here that are my favorites over the years that I've heard. And they really require an orchestra of great finesse. And some of these do not have that, I have to admit, but the performances are very good nonetheless. But the more refined the orchestra, the more precise the conducting, the more transparent and clear the textures, the better off you will be in Debussy's Images. So let's take a look at some of the recordings I have sitting here. I'll pick up the first pile of them. All right. Well, this one may not come as a surprise. This is my historical recording of choice, my enregistrement historique du choix. Edward von Beinum and the Concertgebouw Orchestra. I mean, Beinum was just a great, great, great conductor in this kind of repertoire. His Debussy is all terrific. And he had, again, that sense of clarity, of precision, of an orchestra as sort of a chamber ensemble writ large. And you hear that in these performances, even though I think some of these, let's see, some of these were in stereo and some of these were mono. I think these are all mono. Let me just make sure and take a look. Let me see. It doesn't say, but they were. Oh, there we go. Mono. The Images are mono. Right. Everything else, the La Mer and the Nocturnes were stereo. It doesn't make any difference. Truly doesn't make any difference. The playing is extraordinary. The interpretations are wonderfully fluid and precise, and that's what you need in this music. So, von Beinum, a great choice for the historically minded. Also, and you know, I mean, I have to confess, we're going to be going through these with a lot of the usual French people, right? You know, the Frenchies, the guys who did the French music. Not because they always liked it, but because they were only record companies only let them do the French music. But some of them did it very, very well. Some of them did it less well. One of the great French conductors, of course, was Pierre Monteux. He did it with the London Symphony on Philips. The orchestra was not in its best state during Monteux's tenure. He did whip them into shape for some performances, things like the Sibelius II, the Dvorak 7, the Enigma variations. I mean, he did some great, great stuff. I don't think the playing is as good on this set as it is on some of those other recordings that he made, because I think the music requires more exceptional precision in the way of you know, just that, like I said, that sort of analytical clarity. And there's a certain casualness to these performances, but Monteux was so into the style that I think he's worth hearing just for that reason alone, because of his sovereign command of the idiom and his knowledge. And of course, it's not bad. I mean, you know, it's not terrible. It's not embarrassing. Another one, which is really quite fine and had, you know, the orchestra's up to it, is Charles Munch with the Boston Symphony. Now, Munch was more of an impulsive, emotional guy, and these are not impulsive, emotional pieces. These are I wouldn't call them cerebral, but like I said, they are stylized. And so Munch's performance, I think performances some people might find to be, let me just put this booklet away. Some people might find them to be a little beefy, a little less observant of detail than they could be. But again, I mean, the Boston Symphony was fabulous, and Munch's Debussy generally was very, very exciting. And they're very good performances. They really are. Wonderfully played. Meanwhile, back in Europe, we had the Orchestra de la Suisse Romande, who, of course, recorded all this stuff for Ansermet. But I prefer to hear the Orchestra de la Suisse Romande in the performances by Ataulfo Argenta, who was a wonderful conductor, of course, and not because he's Spanish and they're doing Iberia. I just think, again, if you don't have a great orchestra, and the Orchestra de la Suisse Romande was never a great orchestra, they could be very good. They got better as they went. But, you know, in the 50s, But, and Ansermet was an extremely analytical conductor. And I think that actually Argenta does a better job because he's a less analytical conductor with an orchestra that, quite frankly, just doesn't stand up to the scrutiny. I mean, if you're going to have a so-so, but, you know, decent professional orchestra, you should have a conductor who isn't going to sweat the detail too much, but who has the sweep, the vibrancy, the sense of color and texture that the music demands. And these are very, very beautiful performances, which I still enjoy quite often. Next, now we get to, like, let's see, who's this? Oh, yes. We get to some of the real heavy-duty sort of composer conductors. And this is where I think the pieces really come into their own. Martinon. Everyone knows Martinon. Everyone loves Martinon. Everyone knows his Debussy is superb. It was wonderful. It was always wonderful. It's still wonderful. The La Mer in this set is wonderful. It's great. Martinon was a composer. He was a composer-conductor. He had exactly that sense of crispness and clarity that the music demands and that he got his orchestra to give him, even though the orchestra, which in this case was, let me see, there were two of these, it's the ORTF orchestra, I think, and he had Orchestra de Paris for the Ravel business, right? Whichever one, it doesn't matter. They sound French, and it, again, not fabulous, not great in the stellar world-class sense that we may be used to or that we can have from other conductors. But Martinon was a fantastic conductor, and he knew the music inside and out. So those are worth hearing. Now, let me pick up my other pile. Sorry about this, but when I'm in the overflow room, I need to get myself a table or something I can put these discs on so I won't have to bend over. But for the moment, now we get, this is a really, really good one. No one pays attention to it. Nobody cared. I don't understand why. It was absolutely first rate. Esa-Pekka Salonen and the Los Angeles Philharmonic on Sony. Now, Salonen is, of course, a composer, and he is great with contemporary music. And the fact of the matter is, the Images are modernist pieces. They truly, truly are. And they benefit from that approach. He has that composer's analytical clarity, and the approach, it suits the music to a T. The orchestra sounds great. The recordings were wonderful sounding. All of his Los Angeles recordings sounded really good. And that's a great Image. You also get the Prelude to the Afternoon of a Faun and La Mer, and they are very, very fine performances. I didn't mention this one in the La Mer talk, but I probably should have. But La Mer, again, it's sort of more of a romantic piece, isn't it? It kind of does, it does really well when you aren't sweating the detail quite so much. Go figure. All right, now you just know that we have to talk about, they're all sitting here, Pierre Boulez. Now, Boulez did them twice. He did them twice in Cleveland. They're both done in Cleveland. One for Deutsche Grammophon, one for Sony. The Sony is better. I'm telling you, it's better. They're both very, very good. But there was something about the quality of the playing on the Sony performance and the analytical clarity of Sony's recording. It's a great sounding recording. I think that these performances are amazing. There are no more crisp, clean, I mean, everything seems to be etched, with almost with a hard outline. You know what I mean? It's a wonderful, wonderful sound for these particular works. And I think Boulez was never better than in the Sony Cleveland Image. I mean, there's also the Boulez Debussy box. This is a mixed program here it's got some great stuff. It's got the Cleveland La Mer with Zell, which is fantastic, and a bunch of other things on it. But however you get them, one of the top 2 or 3 versions has got to be Boulez in Cleveland. Not so much on Sony, not so much Boulez in Cleveland on DG. If you do have it, you won't be disappointed. I mean, you could certainly do worse. They're very, very, very good. He hadn't lost it, but there's just the sound of that orchestra on those Sony records is just marvelous. Marvelous. Now, here is my sleeper recording. And I'm going to play you some samples from it because I can. The sleeper recording that I really was interested in telling you about. When I come back to the overflow room here, I look around for things that I'd stuck away and haven't paid much attention to, but that I remember very, very fondly. And one of them was definitely this, Serge Baudo with the Czech Philharmonic on Supraphon. Now, the Czech Philharmonic is a great Debussy orchestra. They have a lot of the same tonal qualities as an orchestra as the Paris Conservatory Orchestra had, which is that unblended sound, trumpets with lots of vibrato, wonderful plangent woodwinds, just a general leanness and transparency. It's just right. Now, the quirk here, and it's really very interesting, is that they recorded this in the Rudolfinum, which is a barn. I mean, it's the most resonant room in the world. And you hear that. These recordings have way too much reverberation. They really do. I'm going to show you. I'm going to play you the opening of Iberia. Just listen to this. Listen to how this sounds. See what I mean? I mean, you could hear the reverb, but by the same token, the clarity is there. You hear everything. I mean, there's nothing gets swallowed up, but there's just a lot of reverberation around the orchestral timbres. You either like it or you don't. In some passages, it sounds wonderful. Listen to this little bit from towards the end of Ronde de Printemps, where when the strings come in, oh my God, it's the most beautiful sound, and it's such a Debussy kind of sound. You know what I mean? You'll know what I mean. Here, listen. Beautiful, isn't it? It's a wonderful, wonderful disc. It really is. You also get on this one, is a lot on here. You get Images, you get Je, and you get the Dans Sacré et Profane. It's really great. And Baudo was a terrific conductor. He really was, or really is. If he's still around, he's still around. So he's out there somewhere. Didn't make too many records. He bounced around from label to label. And, he did the Honegger symphonies with the Czech Philharmonic, which were fabulous. And this Debussy disc is great. I mean, they're a great, great sounding French orchestra. Finally, however, I think the best versions of the Images were both done by Michael Tilson Thomas, believe it or not. He did them twice. He is a stupendous Debussy conductor. He really is. He just has it for that music. He knows what he's doing. Now, this first set, which is the one I'm holding here, is with the Boston Symphony. And, they're the great French orchestra that isn't French and that, was trained by the great French conductors. And he's just a great Debussy conductor. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous Image. I love it. It sounds so wonderful. It has all of the analytical clarity that I want, all of that textural sensitivity, the balances, the rhythm, but also an overall pervading warmth that some of the more like the Boulez performance doesn't have. If you find it too cold, then you'll love Tilson Thomas. And he remade the Image with the San Francisco Symphony. It was released very recently on their own label, and that is probably the most beautiful performance of the Image I've ever heard. It's so lovely. It's one of those performances that if a Baudo had done it, it would have been this sort of micromanaged concoction of annoyances. You know what I mean? Because it has that level of detail and that level of sensitivity to dynamics, to balance. It's amazing. But that doesn't happen. It all sounds natural. It all flows because Tilson Thomas really knows and loves his Debussy. So my choice for the Image, first and foremost, is the Tilson Thomas Boston one, which is available in this French collection, which has the Igor Markevich La Mer and Danses, which is fabulous. Or you can get it, it was one of the DG originals, or you can get the San Francisco one, which is stupendous. Either way, you got to have one of the Tilson Thomas performances in your collection, and then you can move on to anything you want. I would get the Boulez Cleveland on Sony. I would try and get the Serge Baudo. I want Von Beinum with the Concertgebouw just because it's the Concertgebouw. There are many, many beautiful performances and a lot of just average ones because, as I said, this is tricky music to perform. It is special music, and it needs to be handled with great insight and sensitivity and time, preparation, work. It's music that requires work. You know what I mean? It doesn't play itself. So with that in mind, let's keep on listening and find the best versions of Debussy's Images. Thank you. Take care.